as we can. We've got a pretty busy schedule today, and we have some pretty important House-trained senators that need to testify and get to their committee meetings. So with that, we'll open the meeting with hearing on SB 98, providing for the Route 66 Association of Kansas distinctive license plate. And Chris, would you give us an overview, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, committee. Senate Bill 98 provides for the Route 66 Association of Kansas license plate. A vehicle owner may be issued one of these license plates for a vehicle or truck upon proper registration and payment of regular license fees pursuant to KSA 8-143. The applicant should also pay a logo use royalty fee payment, and that is anywhere from $25 to $100, and that fee is set by Route 66 Association of Kansas Incorporated, and that is an annual fee. This license plate is subject to all the requirements of KSA 8-1,141, which requires an initial issuance of 250 license plates and payment by the sponsoring organization of initial design costs up to $5,000 before the license plate will be produced. The logo use royalty payments would be put into a royalty fund for the Route 66 Association of Kansas Incorporated, and those would be paid to that organization on a monthly basis. Provisions of the bill become effective July 1, 2025, but license plate applications begin January 1, 2026. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Anybody have any questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you very much. If you'll turn your attention to the fiscal note, typical license plate fiscal note. The first proponent that we have on the on SB 98 is Senator Tim Schallenberger. Welcome to the committee, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. You should have some a paragraph from me. This is a regular distinctive license plate bill that requires all the usual payments and adjustments. There are 13 miles, 13.2 miles of Route 66, the Mother Road, as it's called, in Kansas. And they're all in Cherokee County. They're in the 13th Senate District. And we have a very active Route 66 Association group in Southeast Kansas. There's one all over the country, from Chicago to St. Louis and Joplin and Springfield. And you've heard the song, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma City is mighty pretty. And so that association is a national association. Next year is the 100th anniversary of Route 66. And on any typical summer day on Route 66 in Baxter Springs, anywhere from 40 to 150 cars go through in groups that start either in Bakersfield or LA or Chicago. And you'll see 20 PT Cruisers, or you'll see 40 Corvettes, or you'll see 50 Harleys. And they get these tour groups established in Chicago or LA, and they're typically Europeans. And so we have a lot of Europeans who are fascinated with highways in the United States, and they go down Route 66. And next year's the 100th anniversary. They're anticipating a large crowd for that. So they've asked for a distinctive license plate. I introduced it, the Senate passed it, and it's in your hands.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for the senator? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. All right, the next proponent, I believe we have Aaron Perry, the Vice President of Route 66 on WebEx. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Perry. And you might have your mic muted, Mr. Perry. Can you read? What's that? All right. Mr. Perry, can you hear us? All right, Mr. Perry, it appears to be something on your end. So we'll go ahead and just consider your testimony as written, and thank you for participating today. All right, do we have any other proponent testimony? Seeing none, do we have any neutral testimony? I see none. Any opponent testimony? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the hearing for SB 98. The next item on the agenda is SB 97, granting the purchasers of non-highway vehicles the option to obtain a title for such vehicle. Chris, would you give us an overview, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, Senate Bill 97. The chairman read off what was the previous short title for how the bill was introduced. The bill was heavily amended in the Senate committee, and I'll explain the bill as it is now. So Senate Bill 97 requires vehicle dealers to obtain a dealer inventory only title for any used all-terrain vehicles, worksite utility vehicles, recreational off-highway vehicles, or motorcycles that are obtained by a vehicle dealer. The bill amends KSA 8-198, which is a statute that provides certain titling for non-highway vehicles and salvage vehicles. Currently, that statute provides that upon the sale or transfer of any non-highway vehicle or salvage vehicle, any purchaser of such vehicles shall obtain a non-highway certificate of title or salvage title, whichever is applicable. And then there are some various titling procedures from there, depending on the type of purchaser, the type of vehicle, and the title history for the vehicle. Senate Bill 97 would add a new type of title application process for these vehicles for a dealer inventory only title. So upon the sale or transfer of any non-highway vehicle or salvage vehicle, and if the purchaser or if a vehicle dealer obtains ownership of a used vehicle that is an ATV, a worksite utility vehicle, recreational off-highway vehicle, or motorcycle, and the vehicle would qualify as a non-highway vehicle, then the dealer shall apply to the county treasurer for this dealer inventory only title. The fee for the title would be $10 paid to the county treasurer, and the disposition process for these fees and where they would go as far as what funds they would be deposited into would be the same for certificate of titles under KSA 8-145B. As I mentioned, the Senate Transportation Committee amended the bill by inserting that dealer inventory only title procedure and removed changes that were made in the bill as introduced, including a section that would have amended part of the Vehicle Dealers and Licensing Act. The bill was recommended favorably for passage by the committee and was placed on the consent calendar, passing 40-0 in the Senate. The provisions would become effective July 1, 2025, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Anybody have any questions for the reviser? Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I have two quick questions. What constitutes right now as a non-highway vehicle?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't bring that definition up with me. That definition's in 8-197. I know that all-terrain vehicles, worksite utility vehicles, recreational, all those are considered non-highway vehicles now, but I can get that exact definition for.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Second question, if this was to become law and a non-highway vehicle gets a title, though the owner gets a title for it, then does it not become a highway vehicle like any other tagged vehicle? That they can get if you get a title, you should be able to get a tag for it, correct?
So the non-highway title is the tag. I guess, are you talking about a title for road use? Because these are typically not used for roads. They're not required to be registered since they're titled as non-highway vehicles. And if someone, I don't know if I can get the division or if they're testifying today, but if they, I don't know if you can title those vehicles as regular highway vehicles because they're not allowed on roads right now. So this is the titling procedure for those types of vehicles.
And if I can indulge the committee, we have Deanne Shepherd with DMV here, and maybe she could come introduce herself. You were shaking your head like you really know this answer, right, Deanne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee. I'm Deanna Shepherd, Senior Manager for Division of Vehicles for KDOR. No, they would not be able to be drove on the highway. They're only allowed to cross a highway to go from one field to another field. These would include like an ATV, a worksite utility, a three-wheeler ATV, more recreational vehicles. They do not have the apparatus to be on the road. So no, they would not have plates. What this does is gives the dealer the right to title that using a bill of sale, which they were not able to do in the past.
So they could not go to their local county treasurer and get a tag for that vehicle.
You are correct.
All right, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Bohai.
So if I'm
Oh,
understanding,
I'm sorry. Representative Delperdang's ahead of you.
Oh, okay, thank you. To the other person that came up, as far as not being allowed to drive on the road, I would encourage either you or maybe the revisor to read statute 8-15, 100, because I carried out allowing them to be driven on the road for agriculture purposes. They are allowed. Now it's subject to local ordinances if you are in towns or not. So anyway, the question I had today, I'm trying to figure out what the real purpose of the bill is, but today, wasn't it last year sometime we had a bill in here as far as what was it? Doing away with the taxation on these OHVs? Because a lot of people were not titling them because they could bypass the property tax and all that. But wasn't there a bill last year about removing property tax or the annual taxation on it?
Representative, I don't
And you
remember
don't
if
have
that
to
was
answer
through
that
this
right now.
committee, but I can certainly.
Yeah, if you can just take a look, I would like to see that though. But okay, thank you.
And you are correct, by the way. I didn't mean to say that they aren't allowed on the roads at all. There are very limited uses for some of these vehicles, worksite utility vehicles, ATVs for agricultural purposes. I think some noxious weed departments can drive
That's correct.
ATVs as well. So generally, they're not allowed on road use, and the types of roads they can use are limited per that statute, but you're correct.
Representative Bohai.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, the bill does not change that it's a non-highway use vehicle, correct?
Correct. It's
Thank you.
Changes, yeah.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chris. So I'm just trying to understand, when I think of a car title and the transfer of that title to, I mean, I would think that a typical title would be transferred to the dealer, and then whenever someone purchases that vehicle, then that title would be transferred. So I'm just trying to figure out the purpose of the creation of a dealer inventory only title. And the proponent may speak to that as well, but I guess, do you have a definition for that, or the instances in which that would, I mean, does that apply to regular cars? I'm still reading through the bill brief here, but.
So, Representative, no, it's only for situations where it's for a vehicle dealer that obtains possession of one of these used type of vehicles. So and I'm not exactly sure the situation for, what prompted the bill, but yeah, it does not apply. It's only available for dealers to apply for.
That's helpful, thank you. I can clarify that with the proponents too.
Any other questions for the revisor? And the proponent may be able to answer some of these. Seeing none, thank you very much. The fiscal note is $1,200. Okay, next item on the agenda, we have one proponent, is Senator Stephen Owens. Welcome to the committee, Senator Owens.
Thank you, and it's good to be back in the House. Good to see some friends, what I would call friends, although some people may not claim me as a friend. I claim them. So yes, I have answers to all of the questions. So let me first start by telling you what we're trying to solve here. So currently, first of all, there's a difference between titling a vehicle and registering a vehicle. Okay, titling a vehicle is just that. It is a title with your name on it, says you own it. Registering it, that's where you register it for on-highway use. And so these are not registerable. The problem was, there's a conflict in statute that says, as an individual owner of a non-highway vehicle, you have to title it, okay? But there was nothing in statute clarifying that dealerships had to offer a title when that vehicle was sold to an individual. What we have found is that many different folks don't title them, which I think though it was mentioned because they want to avoid the property tax, which by the way is SB 10, currently sits in tax committee, passed the House, or Senate, it's over in the House. So the challenge is Missouri and Nebraska don't require titles for non-highway vehicles. So if somebody wants to bring in their untitled vehicle, say they bought it at a farm, sales tax exempt, property tax exempt, they just don't title it. Therefore, they come in a couple years later and want to trade it in, they don't have a title. Therefore, they end up, if they come to a dealership, they end up taking their business elsewhere where that title is not required because they lost their MSO or whatever, and it's just not titled. So originally, the bill started out as, well, let's just, because other states have done away with non-highway titles, let's just do away with non-highway titles. Well, that raised some concerns, and Senator Bowers, who is a car dealer herself, set up a meeting with all the interested parties and ultimately working with the Department of Revenue, come to find out the Department of Revenue actually already allowed for these dealer inventory only titles, but only for four-wheelers and worksite vehicles. Being a dealer myself, you call the Kansas Department of Revenue and you say, what is the, can you explain to me how we're supposed to work this with non-highway titles? And you'd get different answers. Some would say you don't need a non-highway title. Some would say, well, you have to have a non-highway title because the individual you're selling it to is required by law to title it. But if no title exists, then they just go elsewhere or they sell it online without a title and it's not registered. Therefore, the state collects no sales tax in that transaction. So working with the Kansas Department of Revenue, when we found out that this dealer inventory only title actually exists, the thought was, well, for the benefit of the entire industry, let's codify it in statute. That way, if a farmer comes in and doesn't have that title and says, I want to trade in my unit, I can take the bill of sale from them, pay my $10 at the courthouse, get a dealer inventory only title so that when that vehicle is sold, that dealer inventory only title can be taken to your local courthouse and an actual non-highway title issued. So I know I've used title about 386 times. So is anybody confused or have any questions?
Have any questions? Representative Delperdang?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, Senator. And I think you already said this, and maybe I just didn't quite grab it when you did. First off, do you want to tell everybody what you do?
Sure, yeah, and I have that on my, about a year and a half ago, I actually purchased Dan Cycles there in Heston, Kansas. And I'm really excited to be part of that industry, and very much full disclosure, just recognized a problem within the titling statute and trying to find a solution to fix it.
And I've owned ATVs for 25 years, so I've been around this, but did you say, okay, if I've got an ATV, it's an old one I pulled off the farm and I don't have a title to it, and I can come into you with, if we pass this, I could actually trade it in.
Correct.
You obtain a dealer-only title. If I'm on the receiving end and I purchase one of these older units, can I then get it titled in my name?
Yes, that's what the dealer inventory only title actually allows you to do. Okay, by them creating this, we receive that title, and it's only to be held in inventory until it is transferred to an individual. That individual then takes that title and gets a title in their name.
So kinda, sorta similar to how an antique vehicle could be, or an older vehicle where I can buy it on a bill of sale and then eventually get it titled down.
Sure, yeah, this just, like I said, it was interesting as we met with the Department of Revenue to find out that they actually already had kind of a process that even though we had called multiple times to dealer licensing to try to get clarification on, we were never told about. This just codifies it in statute, makes it clear and easy.
If I could just throw the comment out, I think this bill needs to happen. I really do, just because of the number of units out there, and not everybody's titled these things. If anything, it's a way to title it in the future, which is not there. So thanks for running it. So.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That answered my question.
Any other questions for the proponent? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much.
Do we have any other proponents on SB 97? Seeing none, do we have any neutral testimony? Seeing none, do we have any opponent testimony? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the hearing on SB 97. And we will move on to SB 18, providing for the Hunter Nation distinctive license plate and decreasing the guaranteed number of distinctive plates required for production. We have one, both of our proponents are in flight, but I guess first we'll have Chris go over the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee Senate Bill 18 provides for the Hunter Nation license plate. Any vehicle owner can get a Hunter Nation license plate for a vehicle or truck upon payment of regular license fees, KSA 8-143. And that applicant would also pay a logo use royalty fee of somewhere between $25 to $100. It's set by Hunter Nation Incorporated. They're subject to all the same requirements in KSA 8-1,141 for the initial issuance and the design costs. And the royalty payments or annual fees are paid on a monthly basis to the Hunter Nation Incorporated. Again, the provisions go in effect July 1, 2025, and the license plate applications will begin on January 1, 2026. The Senate committee did take out the section that would have decreased the required amount of initial guarantee of license plate orders for production.
So the requirements are the same as every other distinctive license plate that we do now?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Or do we have any questions for Chris? Seeing none, thank you. If everybody will look at the fiscal note, basically the same. And with that, what I started to say earlier, the proponents are unavailable. They're out of town or in flight, but we're lucky enough to have one of the best designated hitters in the House. We have Senator Tyson to designate hit today. Welcome to the committee, Senator.
Wow, thank you, Chairman Francis. That's kind of you. I am supporting, and thank you for the opportunities to speak in the committee. For those of you that don't know about Hunter Nation, it is a group that was started in Kansas, and it is a national group to promote hunting, safe hunting, and conservation. They do an excellent job, and they also educate hunters on issues to get them involved. It's surprising, but a statistic I'll throw out there is that they throw out is 70% of hunters are not registered to vote. So it's an interesting issue, and I would hope that you would support this legislation.
Anybody have any questions for Senator Tyson? Seeing none, thank you very much, and thank you for coming to the committee today.
Thank you, and thank you for your flexibility.
All right. Do we have any other proponents on House Bill or Senate Bill 18? Seeing none, do we have any neutral testimony? Do we have any opponent testimony? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on SB 18. And the next item on our agenda today is an informational briefing on oversized and overweight loads. And I hope everybody got a document like this on their desk. And this was prepared by our research analyst, excuse me. Walt, would you like to just come in and just say a few words about the data that you got for all of us? I found this to be a very interesting document, but thanks for your hard work on this. It really good data. Anyway.
was asked to do a survey about overweight and oversized permits in Kansas and then in surrounding states, as many as I could, and that's what you have before you. I think I got to about 15, 16 states and just kind of did a radius around Kansas, so it ended up being mostly just the central states, the ones that are closest to us. One thing I just wanted to bring to your attention as you're reading it, just to hopefully make it more understandable to you, under the column duration, those are really my titles. If it's not a single trip or an annual, I called it special. Special just means anything that's not per year or per trip. And there's more explanation under the specials, as you can see under the per column. So really, I think hopefully it's pretty understandable. And if you have any questions as you're looking at it, I'm open to answering those as far as the chart goes.
Does anybody have any questions for Walter? Representative Bohai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So our fees look competitive as far as what's standard around. Would you say that we need to increase them?
I cannot speak to policy as far as legislative research goes. I can really only tell you that in comparison to other states, I really don't know. They look comparable to me. I can't speak to
No problem. Thank you.
to whether it could be raised or not. Or
Any other questions for Walter? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much for your work.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next presenter, I would like to recognize Representative Gary White. I think maybe it would be best if we let some of the other people talk, and then maybe Dominique, if she wants to respond to any of them at that time, she can maybe address some questions. All right, Gary, or Representative White, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Transportation Committee, for having me today. I wish I would have gotten that sheet you guys just had. I've not really done my homework, but I just hear on behalf of a constituent of mine that
Do we have his PDF?
well, yes, I have a PDF. I have pictures. And my testimony's changed a little bit since the secretary came and sat behind me. I'll be nice.
Damn bureaucrats.
I've brought pictures. I'd like for them to come up. It'll save me 1,000 words. Yeah. It'd be nice. Have a business in Ashland. And the daughter, they're in semis, both east and west. We have one lifeline in and out of Ashland. A lot of people think it's a back road, but it's our only road. And to the west, there's some canyons, deep canyons. And here's these semis coming down a hill, and they've got a flagger stopping them at the bottom of a hill. Here comes an extra wide load. They lost a mirror off of their semi because you can't scoot over. There's been people that, for some reason, swerved off and into these canyons. They lost their life. They're serious canyons, and it's 160 all the way to Medicine Lodge. There's deep canyons. I see everybody shaking their head. So you guys get 1,000 words. I will continue. That's fine. I had my intern do this. He's a little better at computers than me. So I'd kind of like to, I had a visit. I went up to Jetmore, Hodgman County, and had a visit with the Road and Bridge guys. And I asked him, one of the pictures, they had a windmill tower fall off their semi, and it closed the road. They closed school that day. I suppose half the kids are on the other side of the road. I don't know. But it leaves you to questions like, really? Did you not strap it down? It was a big thing. They had to get a crane out there. And I talked to him a little bit, and he wanted me to say something about the overweight. He's the road and bridge guy. He had a picture he sent me, and it had a semi with, I don't know how many extra axles. And he heard, oh, the super tankers are coming from the big dairies, and they're okay, except when they turn the corner. He said, boy, it tears up my intersections. I don't know the law. I don't know the weights. I know these pictures I would like for this committee to see. I mean, they're wide. I don't even know what they are. I have noticed, and I asked the road and bridge guy, have you noticed there's no more windmills going up and down the roads? Since about, November, they've dropped off dramatically. But when you're out there and you see two windmill blades meet each other on the highway, something's not right, and we go shopping, we do our shopping in Dodge City from Ashland, it's 50 miles away. And when I have a scheduled meeting in Dodge, the last 3 or 4 years, 20 minutes extra. It's 50 miles, so it ought to be an hour from doorstep to doorstep. But you have to count on, it's just so much. And it's like, what is going on? But it's dramatically decreased. So with that, I'm sorry I didn't have these outstanding pictures. I would stand for
Maybe we can
questions.
get, do you have copies of the pictures, Meg? Because I don't have them in my file. Okay, all right. And so maybe we can get those printed off and share them with the committee so they can have a better idea of what you're talking
I've
about.
got a really smart intern, and I thought he had it worked out. And I sent him a text this morning, and he must be busy, and he's majoring in physics over at KU. So I think he's kind of busy, so.
Well, and just what Gary says, I don't know if it happens across the state, but I know it happens a lot in your district, and it happens a lot in Representative Hoffman's district. He's also expressed some of these concerns with me. Does anybody have any questions for Representative White? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then do we have Sheriff Jacob Bruckner on the WebEx? Cole, do you know? Okay, I heard he had an emergency and wasn't able to. And we also have Captain LaRoe with the Kansas Highway Patrol. So if anybody has any questions, he has written testimony in the file that we may, if we have time, give him an opportunity to share with us. So with that, our star performer today is Dominique Shannon. She's a professional engineer with KDOT, and she will also present to us. Is Dominique doing it or is someone else? Yeah. All right. Welcome to the committee, Dominique.
Thank you, Chairman Francis. Let me get things set up, please. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Francis and committee members, for allowing KDOT to come speak with you today about oversized overweight permitting. I am Dominique Shannon. I am the Assistant Bureau Chief for the Structures and Geotechnical Services, which is where the permitting section is housed. Today, I'm here to present some general information about permits and permitting, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. For any answers that I do not have, we will get you the answers. Is there any way to? Thank you very much. All right, in front of you, I believe everybody has a little handout of the presentation. In front of you right now, you have some important words and definitions that I'll be using throughout the presentation. These are here for you to reference anytime during the presentation or after at your convenience. So what is a legal load? Typically, the tractor trailers shown here in vehicles that are smaller are what we would consider legal in Kansas. The width and the height of these are pretty well set. In parentheses, you've seen 14'6". That's for the cylindrical hay bales. But depending on what is being towed, the length of that vehicle can vary as to what is legal. It could be a boat transporter, an RV, or the size and the number of trailers and semi-trailers that are being pulled behind that truck tractor can define it as legal or an oversized overweight. Along with the dimensions, it's also important that we consider the weight of the vehicle and the load. The equation that you see in the box is the Federal Bridge formula. What that does is help us calculate what would be overweight versus what is legal. And then fortunately, the Kansas law has it tabulated for us to be able to pull that information easier. So what is an oversized overweight load? Basically anything that is greater than statute would be an oversized overweight load. What's also important is that it is non-divisible. So non-divisible means that it would take more than 8 hours to be able to dismantle that load, or if dismantling that load destroys the purpose and the use, it's considered non-divisible. So between it being larger than what's allowed by statute or being non-divisible, you would then need to apply for a permit. So within Kansas, we have many permits available for purchase. Most of these permits will fall into 4 different categories. Depending on the size and the weight of the vehicle and load is going to dictate the type of permit that you will need or that a user would need. So the permits listed here are the majority of our annual permits. They account for about 10 to 11,000 permits that we issue each year. Highlighted in yellow are the 2 that are purchased most frequently. Together, they account for about half of the annual permits that are issued each year. As the name considers, an annual permit is valid for 1 year, and it can be used as often or as frequently or as infrequently as the purchaser would like. It can be used once, or it could be used every single day or multiple times a day. Some more information on annual permits. They are set by a maximum size and a maximum weight. For demonstration purposes, what we show in the graphic in red would be an average sized passenger vehicle. In blue would be the average size tractor, semi-trailer, tractor-trailer. And in yellow would be the maximum length of an annual permit at 126 feet, which is equivalent to 42 yards. The next step up from an annual permit would be a standard permit. The differences between the standard permit and an annual permit would be that maximum weight and the maximum height. These are also valid for 7 days versus 1 year, and they can only be used as a single trip. The standard permits do have a printed route associated with the permit, whereas the annual permit does not. The next step up from a standard OSOW permit would be a large structure permit. When the dimensions of the standard permit are exceeded, you're getting into large structure territory. But it still needs to be at or less than the maximum weight as defined on the slide. The picture that we show on the slide is an example of a storage building, which would be a large structure. Based on the overall width and the height of that, it requires a little more effort. Our district personnel are very important when it comes to being able to move the large structure loads. They're what I would consider our boots on the ground. They are very knowledgeable of the roadside obstructions that are out there. And so they have, they're able to review these permits to make sure that they are comfortable with these size loads moving through each of our KDOT districts. All right, super loads. This is the fourth type of permit of the four that we're categorizing today. I think super loads would be basically a class of their own. And I think that's what most people think of when they think of the OSOWs. Examples of these would be the wind tower that you see here in this picture, or the nacelles, which are the head, nose of a windmill, which can be pretty heavy. As you can see in this picture, this would be a wind tower, as mentioned. Sorry, I do not have a pointer. Thank you very much. A pointer to be able to help explain, but we look at super loads based on the axle groups. And in that picture, at the very back end of that tower section, you see 3 axles sitting together. That would be an axle group. And we also look at the out-to-out spacing of those axles. So from the front axle underneath the truck tractor to the very back axle, that would be our out-to-out spacing. So we look at the axle groups, the out-to-out, and the total weight. Automatically, if the total weight is greater than 150,000 pounds, it's going to be a super load. But at 80,000 pounds, you could still be considered a super load. If that weight is concentrated within 20 feet, it would be a super load. But if it were to be stretched out, let's say to 40 feet, it would no longer be a super load. So this is another example of our super loads. What I would like to pull attention to is the weight of it, 700,000 pounds. This load required special analysis by our bridge load raters to examine the bridges to be able to see if this would be able to route safely throughout on its route, with the understanding for this one specifically that in order for us to feel comfortable that the load had to cross this bridge at a maximum of 5 miles per hour. So another important part besides getting the right permit is our escort vehicles and our escort operators. Starting on January 1st of 2020, escort vehicle companies were required to register with the state of Kansas. And with that registration, all of the operators that work underneath them had to be certified. That certification included taking a course and passing a proficiency test. The people that do this work, I took one of these classes, and the people that do this work need to be highly skilled multitaskers. Just by looking at this picture, you see the escort truck in the middle with the oversized load sign on the front of it. But they need to be able to communicate at the same time with the hauler of the oversized overweight load, the utility trucks, alerting the traveling public as to what is happening, and following that designated route that has been set on the permit. So when users are applying for a permit, we use the K-Trips program. It's available 24 hours a day. They can purchase their permits 24 hours a day, and they have instant access to their route once they purchase that permit. All of the route restrictions that may be throughout the state of Kansas are loaded into this system to be able to provide a route using the restrictions. Previous versions of our OSOW permitting just to prove some of the efficiencies that K-Trips has provided. People would have to call in and potentially be in a queue line to be able to get assistance. If those loads needed additional information to be able to get through, they would have to fax in the information. The approved permit would have to be faxed back to the person. And then the people who are actually doing the routing would have to look at individual maps of vertical clearances and weight restrictions and construction and pulled all that information together to be able to come up with a route. Fortunately, all of that information is now in K-Trips to make things easier. The KDOT personnel that we have working on the oversized overweight permitting, we have about 15 to 16 people total that work on these permits. 9 to 10 of these people are at headquarters, including Andrew Spencer, our team lead. And then we have 1 to 2 personnel in each of the districts that work on the permits. Everyone except for central permitting does this as an additional part of their regular responsibilities. And these people that help work on these permits include district engineers, area engineers, construction supervisors, bridge plan developers, asset managers, and web content developers. Central permitting are the only folks that do this as their full-time job. They are what I would consider our front line because they are the ones that handle phone calls that come through because people do still have the option to be able to call in for assistance. They handle any online chats that may come through, and they also assist with all of the annual and standard permits. So K-Trips was created specifically to route oversized overweight loads. And K-Trips was created to make the experience similar to being able to basically go on to one of us being able to go on to Google, enter in an origin and destination, and get our route. And so I'm going to use for an example, if I were coming from Colorado on I-70 at the Colorado border, and my destination is Hutchinson. I want to go check out the salt mines. And so for me to be able to do it, I would just simply enter into, let's say Google in this case, and enter in my origin, my destination, and it would be super easy for me as a driver of a legal size load. My only concern may be construction. That's it. So for example, again, I would just type in my origin destination. Google Maps would pop up with a route instantly and even give me some options. But it's not quite that easy when it comes to an oversized or overweight load. Now, we have attempted to make it easier versus what was done in the past, but there's still a lot of items that have to be considered. So when a user goes into K-Trips, before they even have a route or they have a clue how they're going to make it happen, they have the option to use what we call a bid route. It's a way to be able to see if there is a viable option before even applying for a permit. They enter in general information about the vehicle, as shown, to start. And then we get into being able to load or enter in the information about the origin and destination. As shown on the slide, there's multiple ways to be able to enter that information. For this example, I went with a border crossing starting at I-70, as I explained, and I decided to use a lat long, which was near Hutchinson. When I hit that validate and run button at the bottom, it's either going to give me a route, it's going to generate me a route, or it's going to say that there is no route. So potentially, because of at the top, it might be a little hard to see based on what you have. It says there were 39 restrictions. Those 39 restrictions are preventing this load, specifically this load at those dimensions and that weight, from being able to get a route, to have a route generated from I-70 to Hutchinson. So the user has the ability to be able to go to zoom in and click on each of those red lines and see what the restriction may be. Here is an example of 3 of those 39 restrictions. that prevented a route from being generated. By changing the origin and moving it from I-70 to US 160, a potential route can be generated, which is shown in blue. I'm hoping you guys are able to see that. Okay, at least on your handouts, good. All right, with the route that is shown on the screen, turn-by-turn driving directions are also provided. What's nice about these turn-by-turn directions is that they are going to read similar to what a person would get on Google Earth. Turn left, turn right, continue straight, rather than cardinal directions. Turn north, turn south, which can be a little difficult when we have north-south routes that may run east-west and trying to keep straight which way you're supposed to go, which helps with keeping vehicles or keeping loads on route. So as we mentioned, the bid route is a great option when you don't have a permit yet and you're just looking for some viable options out there for your load to go through. But what happens when you have an annual permit already? Because those annual permits do not come with a route. So it's basically the same process, but instead you're going to be you're going to have to input additional information. The actual axles will need to be put in with the axle spacings. And with that information, they're able to potentially get a route, and that will help them avoid restrictions throughout the state of Kansas between their origin and destination. So here's an example of some of the information that we require when people are ordering a permit or specifying, try to be able to use that annual permit route or getting a standard OSOW, large structure, or a super load. The information as the top is the identifying information of the tractor trailer, and then the information below is the individual axles and the spacing of those axles. And then this information is used to find a route that will be printed on the permit when it is purchased for use. Similar to the bid route, an origin and destination are selected. In this example, the load is traveling from the Nebraska border through Kansas to the Oklahoma border. A route was found, and again, driving directions are provided. And these driving directions are provided when they go through the application online, but again, they will be printed on the permit when it is purchased. So we mentioned that there are restrictions throughout the state that have to be considered when we are routing these loads. So we're going to go through a few examples of some of the restrictions that we consider. One of the first ones that we are going to discuss or mention would be the weight restrictions. This would be on our bridges. For example, this bridge in McPherson County has a legal weight posting, which means no oversized, overweight loads can travel across it. Fortunately for this example, we have a deck replacement that will be done in fiscal year 26. And when that bridge is replaced, those weight restrictions will be removed and we'll have another route to be able to use to move oversized, overweight loads through the state. And just another example of some of the restrictions that are loaded into our K-Trips program would be the vertical clearances. And we maintain a database of all of the vertical clearances of objects, bridges, pedestrian bridges, and overhead sign structures throughout the state of Kansas in our system. Another one would be turning movements. We have turning movement restrictions at some of our intersections and interchanges. These will typically limit the length of the load that can maneuver through the area. And then construction. Construction plays a large part in the routing of our loads. They can be long-term or short-term. For instance, US 69 in Kansas City, there's going to be, it's a long-term construction program, but those restrictions may vary based on whatever type of construction may be occurring at the time in that project. What's nice is we have the CAN drive system that our KDOT personnel enters in different construction restrictions into CAN drive, and that information is automatically pulled into our K-Trip system. So as that stuff changes, it's automatically updated in K-Trips. So once a route has been established based off of the information from the user and the restrictions that are entered into the program, there's a viable route. That route is able to be reviewed by KDOT. And when it has been approved by KDOT, it is sent to the user for payment. After the user completes that purchase, the permit is created for the user, and they're able to basically print it or view it on a PDF viewer. So some general information about our permits. You guys may still have a yellow heat map, which is fine. We revised it to one that you see here. What you had before, the different types of permits were layered on top of each other, and I was concerned that might add additional questions about what each of those colors meant. So I've updated it to one that includes all of the loads as one color. So what you will see, at least on the screen, is based on the thickness of the line and the intensity of that blue, is going to tell you which routes are used more often. So to point out a few of them, US 83 on the west side and the west side of the state, along with US 54 near Liberal. Through the central part of the state, US 81 and I-135. I-35 on the eastern part of the state. What I would like to point out also is that thicker blue line that's just to the east of 135. That is US 77, and that's a route that we use from Fort Riley to the Oklahoma border for our government loads.
Which one is that again?
Let me get back to it.
US.
Oh no, there we go, wrong button. I apologize. Okay, which one are you asking about, sir?
You said the military route.
The military route. It is the one that is just to the east of 135. It's a little thicker.
Intersects with the turnpike down there.
Yep.
Okay. And then what's the far one on the right? Is that 69?
The far one
On the east?
East end, that would be 75. That's going north-south that you're referring to. That would be 75, yes.
So that's the farthest east, relatively dark one is 75.
Yeah, of the more heavily traveled ones.
And then if we have the orange heat map, I know you said that you didn't really want to get into what the different colors mean, but would you get into what the different colors mean?
No problem.
We've got blue and we've got yellow that I can tell.
So these are the different, what we pulled this from was a dashboard that we have, and those colors represent, and I do not know the exact order of them, but some of them are, one color will be our over dimensions, like our super loads. Some of them would be our large structures. I would expect that the orange, just based on the sheer size of it, would be our standard oversized overweight permits. But because these layers are on top of each other, and depending on how those layers are being turned on, you are seeing more of the standard OSOW as the predominant one, when you only see, let's say the blue is our super load, and so it looks like we only have super loads going through a small port of the northwest corner of the state. We know that's not true.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much.
Okay, no problem. Gladly. Okay, so permit count trends continuing. This is just a table illustrating the number of permits that are issued each year, broken into the 4 permit types. Pull attention to the annual and the standard oversize overweight. That's okay. I feel like people would like to look at the presentation, not me so much. So the annual and the standard oversize overweight permits are the bread and butter of our permitting system. And just to go back and say, and to re-explain, our central permitting staff, the ones that are our full-time staff members that work on OSOW, that's the meat and potatoes of their work. That's why they are full-time, because they are working on potentially 63,000 permits a year between the two. And then just, numbers are nice, but visuals, charts are very helpful to be able to see a comparison of the standard OSOW permits that are issued versus the other permits. And then a comparison of the fees from before January 1st of 2020 versus after January 1st of 2020. There was a cost increase that was done in that time frame. And then just a simple graph of the revenue that is generated from our permit fees. And one of the last notes would be the challenges and opportunities that we have working with OSOW. One of the ones that we have been making great progress on has been the changing the look and the flow of the permit. A lot of these loads are not just traveling in Kansas, they are traveling through Kansas and across this country. And so there has been an initiative to make sure that permits across the different states have the same look and flow so that these haulers are able to find that information easily on the permits as they are traveling. Other challenges that are being discussed both regionally and nationally would be the improving railroad safety at crossings, the safety enhancements by providing audible turn-by-turn directions to the drivers and the escorts, efficiency with multi-state routing. This would be something similar to what we have with the bid route, where it's a preliminary, and instead of it only being focused on one state, they would be able to, let's say, go from California to Kentucky and be able to get a preliminary route across the country. And of course, there's the increased demand of these larger and heavier loads and how that's working with our infrastructure and how the state keeps up with the changing and growing industry. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much, Chairman Francis and committee members. And if there are questions, I would be happy to try to answer them.
And if you don't mind, committee, let's let her rest her voice for a minute, and let's let Steve LaRoe, or Captain LaRoe, come up. I didn't know if we were going to have time for him to give a quick presentation, but I think they're a big partner in this also. And then we'll get back, put Dominique on the firing line. Welcome to the committee, Captain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, I'm Stephen LaRoe. I'm the captain for the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program for the Kansas Highway Patrol. What that really means is I'm in charge of commercial motor vehicle enforcement. We do work very closely with our friends at KDOT when it comes to permitting. A lot of questions that we do get asked right out front is, do we escort oversized loads? As a law enforcement agency, the answer is no. Unless it's very rare circumstances, Department of Defense would typically be one of those. Since I've been the captain of the Highway Patrol or MCSAP program, we've only done it once in a little over a year. So it's not something that comes up very often. But when we do have issues with oversized loads being off their route that they pull from K-trips, there's a lot of considerations that need to come to mind. One of those is that we can't just park this thing somewhere. We've got to get it somewhere where it's safe so they can get them back on a route, get an approved route so we don't go over bridges that we're not supposed to. We don't break pavement services. We don't put these things on private property. If we were to take one of these oversized or overweight loads and put it on the truck stop for Grandma's Diner, the proprietor is likely to come out and complain about the damage we've done to their concrete and their surfaces. So when it comes to an oversized load, these things are a little bit difficult to manage at times. We do what we have to. Occasionally, that might mean that we have to take it down to the Oklahoma border, in particular for Southwest Kansas, and we'll have an Oklahoma trooper help us out with that. Again, when it comes to oversized loads, there are many of them. And typically speaking, we see everybody thinks oversized loads. They think wind turbines, wind blades, et cetera. They are typically escorted by escort vehicles. Those companies, as Dominic said earlier, have to register. They would do, if they have to close an intersection down, they're supposed to put on their reflective vest, their hard hat, get their lights and their stop signs to close that intersection down. We do get a little impatient. We don't want that to happen to us because we get stuck behind that for a little while. Some of those turns are tight. They may have to move utilities as well, such as power lines, to get over that load. So if you do get stuck there, it can be an inconvenience, and that's typically where my office will hear complaints. Those routes that they do go down, again, are permitted by KDOT. One of the issues that we run into frequently in my office when dealing with something that comes off a route, when KDOT issues that permit, that's for state roads. Now I'm going to deliver into a rural part of a county. If I come off that state highway, that carrier is supposed to make contact with a local county to determine what's the best route to get that there. That's not going to be on their permit. So if they have a reason to drop off, pick up a load, or be in that area, they're going to be technically off their route, but they're going to be well within their rights to deliver and make the movements that they're required. In a very big nutshell, I said these things are very large, they're very heavy. When it comes to axles, Dominic had a lot of good pictures up there. The long and the short of it is, if it's a single axle, think about the front of the truck, it's 20,000 pounds. If they're double axles, 34,000 pounds are the weight limits. Triples, depending on how they're spaced, can either be 42,000 or 44,000 pounds. Quad axles are 50,000 pounds. So you see a lot of those axles stuck together. They have to meet a certain distance to be considered a part of that group. That helps with bridge and not doing damage to the roadways. And with that, that's a very, very kind of rough overview of law enforcement's kind of hand in oversized loads. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Back to, there were about 3 of you that had hands up, weren't there? Okay, Representative Vaughn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do actually have a question for you, Captain LaRoe. I appreciated you including the permit statute in the back of your testimony. I was kind of wondering about some of the other regulations around the people who are actually transporting these loads. So do they have additional training requirements if they're going to transport oversized loads? Are there any requirements outside of like the actual permitting for the professionals who are doing this?
So to answer your question, it's a good question. Typically, if a company wants to move an oversized load, this is their business. It is what they do. These are very experienced drivers. Outside of the permit, is there additional requirement or an extra endorsement on a driver's license? The answer is no.
And then, if I may, Mr. Chair, and then you talked about the escort vehicles. So I was just wondering, is it required for all oversized loads? Is it required for some of them? Or is that just the choice of the company to use that or not?
Those requirements for escort vehicles are detailed in the permit. And a lot of that has to do with the width of the load. But those are detailed by the permit that they're requesting and the dimensions that they enter.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious about restrictions on days or daylight and dark on how they can move. And also, since Secretary Reed's here, I'll mention I followed a 24-foot load with about 8 axles down 156, which is about 25, maybe 25 and a half feet wide. I was nervous running 45 mile an hour, and I thought, what would happen if someone had a medical issue and a fire truck or an ambulance needed to pass? These are kind of minor points, but I'm just curious.
To answer your question, I think we'll start with the daylight. They've got 30 minutes before sunrise, 30 minutes after sunset, unless it's an overweight. They're allowed to run after that time, assuming the dimensions are not outside the lanes of traffic. So overweight can run after hours, but over dimension, 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after. to your point again, Representative, I think it's a good question. There are a lot of limitations on, we'll call it moratoriums on when they can go through metropolitan areas for that reason. Those areas include Lawrence, Topeka, Wichita, and parts of Johnson County, so that we can get emergency vehicles around and we don't interfere with rush hour traffic. When a large load does have to go down a two-lane road, we'll have to make adjustments as emergency responders, and we'll make those as we need to. And regardless, we're going to get there, if that answers your question.
Representative Bohai.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I have a family member that does superload logistics. So I was just super enthralled the entire time. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just had one quick question, and it is more for Dominique. How do you guys update the K-trip system? If we have, for example, because there's height requirements, and I know when the people are going through and saying, okay, we've got a low, like a low wire and stuff like that. So how do you guys keep K-trips up to date, if that makes sense, or is it like a yearly thing? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We are working on getting to an annual update on the information. However, when there are, let's say, there is a route that has been widened or expanded, or something has become two-lane divided instead of a single lane, that information gets in pretty quickly, just so that those bridges and those routes are accurate on the permit. But right now, back to the original question, I would say it's about once a year that we go through and we verify that the heights for vertical clearances are accurate. And if there's a roundabout that comes up or a turning restriction because of a change, we get those in there pretty quickly. Thank you.
Representative Wahhabism.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I had a question in regards to slide number 12, which was kind of answered in slide number 32 as to the permits that were actually granted every year, the yearly permits that were granted. My question is, how many are actually rejected by chance? Yearly average. Is it every permit application that comes in is accepted, or is there some that are actually rejected and permits I'm talking about?
So I don't want to say, thank you for the question. I don't want to say that it is rejected. It may go back and forth for revisions between the user and the and KDOT.
Okay.
So they may, and when I guess maybe I should ask, when you say rejected, is it because that potentially we were not able to find a route for them?
Not only that, in terms of, because you did talk about some of the users have to be highly trained and have to, in terms of communications, right? So do they have communication equipments in their vehicles and all of that? Is that actually expected by KDOT, or how's that?
That is not inspected by KDOT.
It's not expected, okay.
No.
Because you did mention that there has to be communication, right, between them, and so the question is, is there any mechanism to actually monitor like the communication equipments between their vehicle and also what's?
We do not monitor it. However, in the regulations, there are requirements as the type of equipment they are supposed to have, the emergency equipment that they should have, and that is spelled out. I do not know which specific regulation, but it's under 3645.
So does KDOT actually inspect that, just in case if there are any updates with respect to software and all of that before they issue out new permits for the operators?
We do not.
Okay. Well, that's it for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one is for Dominique, if I can. Thank you. This was really informative. I was wondering, in the context of the example we got about Ashland, I was just wondering, do you guys also review like collision or crash data with oversized loads to determine the routes that can be used, like outside of Ashland, if they were experiencing a number of collisions in that area over a certain period of time, would that impact whether or not that's considered a safe route for travel, or how do you guys incorporate? Do you have like a local feedback process for that
I would say that we do not have an official local feedback process, but when the local feedback comes through, we do examine it and determine if there are ways for us to help out. Some of it has required us to put long-term restrictions on widths on some of our routes. Some of the turning restrictions that I mentioned at certain interchanges, those have come about due to concerns with accidents. 380, I'm trying to think of which route it may have been, but if I may provide an example, 383 in the northwest portion of the state, we were having concerns with windmill blades and towers and turning maneuvers up there. And we were able to work with, I believe, legislators in that area and the locals to be able to say on 383, we will allow the narrower route, the narrower loads, like the windmill blades, to be able to use 383, and some of the shorter loads that are heavier, like some of the super loads, to be able to use a turning movement so that we had more, so that they were not interacting with each other. So we do try to work with our locals to be able to come up with solutions.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Bohai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, just to speak to Representative Ohabism's question, those requirements, if they're found out of requirement, they're heavily fined depending on who finds that type of thing for the communication information, if they don't have the hard hat or the reflector gear, and it can be in a state. So they are very motivated to make sure they stay in compliance.
Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you answered the question about the windmills and that kind of thing, so thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Representative Delperdang.
Got two if we're kind of winding it down here. First to the captain. Me sitting here with my measly little Class C license. What applies to us as we approach an oversized vehicle as far as passing? Are we, I assume, and I'm talking one that, for example, I've encountered one where they were pulling a trailer house, they had the escort vehicles, and 4-lane highway, he did not want anybody passing him. Is there rules for or against, or what applies to us?
Sure. So if they do have a load that is that wide, that's going to shut down multiple lanes, the escort vehicles at the back of that are going to block both lanes, so you cannot pass it. And that's for your safety and everybody else's. Again, we run into, quite a bit of inconvenience at times because they do move slowly, but the escorts will block those lanes so that you cannot pass.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. And the next question is for Dominique. Dominique. Okay,
You could use Ms. Shannon, but don't use that on me, okay?
What's that?
Her last name's Shannon. That's.
Just a curiosity, and if you cannot answer it, that's cool. You're a PE, right? Okay. I'm intrigued on slide number 3 where you got into the bridge formula. And I'm just trying to look through it. LN, is that linear times the number of axles, or what are we?
L is the distance between axles.
Okay.
And N is going to be the number of axles within that distance.
Okay, the 12N, which is the N again, but what's the 12?
12, it's a coefficient. I have not dug in to figure out what each of those coefficients and constants mean within the equation.
Okay, and 36, I assume that's the length of the truck with the axles from the front to the rear, or is that?
We'll have to say that I am not sure what each of those constants.
Okay, that's fine. And then the 500, I assume you round it to the nearest 500 pounds. Okay, I was just curious and nothing more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Dominique, I have just a couple if you, or Ms. Shannon, I have a.
Yes, Representative Francis.
So what is, let's say we've got a highway that, that has no shoulder whatsoever. Lane widths, are they pretty constant, 12-foot
They're
lanes
for
across
our
the
state highway system, I would say they're pretty consistent.
What is the maximum width load that you'll allow to go through that or go down that road with a K-trips routing, without the special review by staff.
So I would like to say that that is something that we have been working on to be able to have something that is more consistent from district to district to say, we'll just use as an example, if it's a 24-foot roadway, we might only allow us 15-foot to be able to go through. Problem being is that we don't typically put that type of limitation unless we are seeing problems out there. Because if we have construction on another route that we would typically use, and then we have this additional long-term restriction, then that's going to prevent loads to be able to get through the state.
So the reason it's 15 foot is because a normal semi has like a 8-foot, 6-inch width, and you kind of subtract that off to 25 and they can squeeze by each other if they have to.
We would do some type of math like that, but potentially have some additional clearance in there also.
And then what requirements are there for different loads to notify local law enforcement? Is there any requirement at all to let the local sheriff know if certain types of loads are going through their jurisdiction?
There is not a set requirement, but the local jurisdictions are able to get in touch with KDOT if they want to be made aware of permits that are coming through. And we are able to put a note. What we have done on some of the towns is put a note on the permit stating that they are to contact the city or law enforcement before traveling through.
And then this might be more for Captain LaRoe, but do you have any idea, and it may be for you too, what the fines are if they go off are there any fines if they go off their route, their assigned route?
That's a good question, Mr. Chairman. I think I put it down in my testimony. If not, it's a $150 fine if they are ticketed for being off route. They also have to get a new permit that's usually going to put them on a shoulder in a parking lot somewhere for a couple of days until that permit can be registered again.
Anybody else have any questions? Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I've counted 16 axles on some of these things. Just curiosity, what's the largest you've seen permitted?
We do have details in our office of a 1.1 million pound load that has gone through the state safely.
Representative Helgerson.
You led into just what I was going to ask, Dominic. Do we encourage heavy loads like that to go through the state? And do I read that right, that would be a $200 annual fee?
For something that heavy, that would not be $200 per year. That would be $200 per trip.
Okay, so there is a per trip charge difference in an annual fee.
Correct. So an annual fee would be, there is an annual permit that can be used for 1 year that costs $200, but that is limited by size and weight. The super load permits are $200 each, and they can only be used one time.
What's the breakoff from that super load?
For the super load, it's based off of, the general rule is 150,000 pounds. That's the general rule, but there's additional details that could cause something smaller to be a super load also.
Okay, my memory is that we had the hearing for the highway bill that was passed. The damage to our roads occurs from the heaviest trucks and trailers. Has there been a cost analysis of whether or not our fees actually pay for the damage to the road? I'm sure there's one out there. Everybody's smiling.
Everybody's looking for call a friend. I can see that.
Okay, the request is, our fees look low compared to the damage that is done to our highways. Yeah, I know, you're smiling back there. You don't have to answer, but it would, eventually we're going to get into another highway plan. And it should be discussed. We encourage this for economic development, these roads and these businesses. But I don't know if we're actually subsidizing the businesses by paying more of the cost and repairing the roads. And that should at least be a point of some discussion down the road, pardon the pun.
Thank you.
Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is totally off the subject of roadways. Do you have any interface with rail in terms of width and height and those kinds of things? I know that weight's probably controlled by the class rail that we have, but do you work at all with the rail companies, or is that all federal?
That, I will simply say I do not work with the rail company. We only work with them in regards to the crossings and making sure that we have accurate information on the permits so that if there is an incident near a railroad crossing, we have that information up to date for people to contact them.
I would almost think that they're probably more controlled by federal regulations than state. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, and Dominique, I had one question more. You said something about the 3 central office staff are primarily concerned with, is it the super loads?
No, they are mainly concerned with the annual permits and the standard oversize overweight permits.
Okay, which is about 68,000. Was that the people you
Yeah,
were
based
concerned
on
with?
the numbers from the presentation, I want to say that's about 60 to maybe 65,000 permits a year.
And then who primarily works on the large structure and the super load? Is it just a team of experts
large-
across the agency?
For the large structure permits, that's going to be our district personnel, the 1 or 2 people per district. They help with approving those permits. And then for our super loads, it's going to be our 3 super load routers. And then when needed, our load rating engineers assist with those.
So how many people, I guess those people work full-time in your department, or they do other things also?
They do other things also.
Or do they report to you, or you?
They report to Andrew. Andrew is our team lead for the oversize overweight.
Any other questions? I know we're at 3 o'clock, so seeing none. Thank you very much for your time and great presentation. Oh, did I miss someone? Okay.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
All right, committee, that's all we have today. Tomorrow, we're going to look at possible final action on the 3 bills we heard today. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.